myself from getting it and spreading it to others. So we are all here to discuss this very interesting topic called how can affordable housing be leveraged for economic revival? And we have three of our esteemed panel members. Vincent, I think you'll need to rotate your camera a bit.
Yeah.
Yes, great. So we have three of our panelists here, starting with Mr. Ravi Kohli, who is the founder and managing director of Karibu Homes based in Kenya. Then we have Micheal Kaniu, director of Natureville Homes based in Kenya again. And Vincent Agaba, who's the chairman of Governing Council of Real Estate Institute of East Africa, who's based in Uganda. And he's also the MD for Avarts Housing Limited. So starting off with all of you and how you want to take this topic forward, because I'm sure you all have different views to this topic of your own. So let me give you all one round of, introducing the topic on your perspective. How do you think in your professional setup, how affordable housing can be leveraged for economic revival? Starting with Ravi.
Yeah, basically, all around the world, housing enables stability and wealth for generations. And unfortunately, the only continent that doesn't benefit, or subcontinent that doesn't benefit, is sub-Saharan Africa, because home ownership is simply not enabled through a mortgage finance system. I mean, we have less than 25,000 mortgages in the country, and we have a massive SACCO movement, which, for lack of a better description, is not interested in housing because the returns aren't good for them, and it's too long a process. So long story short, there are two impacts that housing, in my view, has on a society, specifically my country, Kenya. One is, if you go back to the post-election violence in 2005, if you triangulate areas where violence was high, home ownership was low. And if you go to areas where home ownership was high, political violence was very low. So home ownership supersedes your political or tribal affiliations, and that's proven just through that fact. And so the fabric of a society like Kenya is really strengthened through home ownership. And then, regardless to say that, an example I have at Karibu Homes, recently I received a very generous bottle of scotch from one of my buyers. And the reason he sent it to me is because he bought a house for 2.5 million shillings on a mortgage. Then he decided to pay the mortgage off. In that period, the house went up to 3.5 million. So he refinanced it. And in his wildest dreams, he didn't think he would send his daughter to university in Kenya. She is now at the University of Cape Town. So that is a direct, true story of the impact that enabling a home ownership can have on a family. So that's my 2 cents.
Great. And in the meanwhile, as we move on from speaker to speaker, I would request the persons who are not speaking to mute their respective mics. So there's no, static overlap here. So we'll move on to Micheal. Micheal, what do you have to say about the economic revival and affordable housing being an integral part of it?
So I think for me, my perspective is maybe a bit different. I think I look at affordable housing as a gateway to set up a young individual for life. So we at Natureville Homes, for example, we are looking to target people between the age of 25 to 30 years old who make less than $500 per month. Because if I look at my own experience in my own life, I was able to get into home ownership before I was 30, which has allowed me to set up and do bigger things later in life. And this can only be done if we can have a communal approach on how we tackle affordable housing, because if you can get that out of the way when you're younger, it allows you to be freer financially in the future. If I look at a lot of my friends who are now going towards 50, many of them don't have homes. Retirement is beckoning. And if you look at Kenya, the stats are very dire for retirement, because if you have not set yourself up properly by the time you get to retirement, life becomes very difficult because if you're stuck with rent and your monthly living, the amounts you get from the pension funds are not quite enough to sustain you for your life. So for me, I look at it as a way to set up financially individuals, and I strongly believe we need to get these individuals when they're young, when they don't have commitments, they don't have families, they don't have other things and the pressures of the rat race, so that they can get into home ownership early. In regards to revival, I think it's very clear, even from the ILO, globally, almost 8% of the global working population works in the construction industry. And as a process to be able to restart the economy, the construction sector has been deemed as a sector where we can quickly ramp up and get guys to work. Just to give you some information around Kenya as we currently stand, according to KEFTA's results and survey this week that was released, more than 75% of all the sites in Kenya currently are closed. And that's almost 450,000 workers who have no employment because of the COVID situation. So it's a quick way, if we can get the ramp up, get people back into construction sites, of course, using safety precautions. The trickle down to the economy is pretty big, from your mama mboga to the guy paying his rent, to the guy supplying materials. So there's a whole catalyst and a whole value chain that can be able to be catalyzed and improve for economic growth just through the construction sector.
Great. Vincent, what do you have to add to this?
Thank you very much, Ananya and the panelists. I think I want to differ so much from the rest of what they have done. I only have to add that we need to look at this also at a macro level. The multiplier effect of the housing sector is so deep that I think it needs to be prioritized. I mean, my colleague has mentioned the issue of, for example, how do you switch on the economy? One of the sectors that should be really thought about is the housing sector. But I will just give you a simplistic example. If you tie in housing and urban planning, housing is a very key ingredient in urban planning if you take the issues very right. For example, the issues of zoning. So when we are talking about affordable housing, we are also organizing society, organizing communities. This affordable housing should have the agenda of how do we have affordable housing, but integrated services also within the affordable housing cities or neighborhoods. So the issues of transport, the issues of garbage collections, the issues of hygiene and sanitation, the issues of communicable diseases, the issues of financial liberation of the individuals owning those homes, all of them actually come to play when you kickstart housing. Now, why we're talking about affordable housing today is not the issue of we don't know that there is that high end, but we are talking about the majority of the population. They fall into the affordable housing segment. Therefore, if we have products within the affordable housing segment, we are sorting only not the issue of housing, but also all the other sectors that actually play around the housing, including infrastructure. That's what, for me, would be very interesting, that when we are talking about affordable housing, we are looking at organizing society, creating jobs, and also making sure that the person at the grassroots benefits from this affordable housing multiplier effect or chain. Thank you.
Great. Now, very rightly pointed out, especially with respect to the sanitary services or addressing the communicable diseases like right now it is for COVID. I think affordable housing has been more of a necessity in a situation like this than ever before. Moving on to start specific objects of discussion, I would like to start off with technology. When we talk about affordable housing and the technology that we are putting into building these, there are multiple aspects that we all consider, right? So with respect to that, now that the entire supply chain across the world has got disrupted, which affects the material, the manpower, and also the technology that is imported to your countries, how do you see this having an effect on the projects that you're working right now with? Ravi, would you like to start off? Ravi, you're on mute.
My mistake.
Yeah.
We're currently not in the middle of any construction work. Mm-hmm. Luckily, we completed our first 3 phases in Athi River.
Mm-hmm.
But just to talk about technology, I don't know what the others on the panel have as a rate of sales per month, but we've peaked at 20 and average at around 10, which means that per month. So which means that to sell 1,000 units, it's 100 months.
Mm-hmm.
So there's often very little point in delivering the units very, very quickly, because all you're doing is really servicing the construction finance cost of ready units. So the way we look at technology, if I'm understanding you correctly, using alternative technology to build units faster, is if you have some sort of offtake guarantee or a working offtake system, which is accessible to, like Micheal said, people earning $300 to $1,000 a month as a family. And that's how we approach it, because there's really no point building faster than you're selling in effect, because all you're going to be doing is carrying a massive finance cost.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of material, I speak to people all the time, and I hope Micheal and Vincent agree with me. Kenya has no problem providing everything to build houses. We need imports for things like sanitary ware and toilets, if the volumes go that direction. They're just cheaper from China because we don't have an industry here that's creating them at the volumes that would be price competitive. But the truth is, Kenya doesn't need too many imported building materials. We've got steel in Kisumu and Nairobi. We've got more sand, more cement factories. To me, it's not a big issue. If we were to scale up to the 100,000 units a year, my belief would be that would then spur local industries to provide the items that we currently have to import. And therefore the value chain just expands. I argue this a lot with investors as well. There's this fear about Kenya not being able to deliver. And if I just give them the statistics of the volumes of cement, sand, steel, that we've just built the SGR with local steel, So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Vincent, I would like to ask you, since he mentioned with respect to Kenya, they don't have much of a trouble with respect to the construction cost or the material or the technology that comes in. What do you have to say about Uganda? You are muted, Vincent. Vincent, you're muted.
What I'm saying, in respect to what Ravi has said, we have these materials around these countries. The only thing is the designs of buildings we are doing, but also the other day I was thinking, maybe Ravi, of course, they will just, my colleague others say something about this, is do we need a house whereby 100% of that house is concrete? Those are the questions we need to ask, because the internal partitioning might not need to be in concrete. So the point is, what are the technologies? What are in both design and also construction, but also the materials we use? If we are using cement and sand for the skeleton, maybe internal, we might need actually to think of using maybe saw or plywood or any other material that actually is good for isolation, in terms of, not isolation, but in terms of sounds and so forth, but necessarily not concrete. Because what I see here in Uganda, the building is built, even the bedroom walls are concrete. Of course, I may not be a quantity surveyor, but I know that every concrete you put on a house brings the cost to the whole construction cost. So that is number one. Number two is that what are the indigenous? Because we had houses here in Uganda. I may look too traditional to go this direction. I remember when I grew up, there was these mud and water houses, and some of them are still standing. I think, to me, the point here is that can we create a functional house for a human being to stay in, first and foremost? Let it have some power. Let it have some water. And let it be not having a dusty floor and good walls that do not create some inhaling situations. Can we look at our indigenous houses, how they were built, and improve those? Now, I think when we talk about affordable housing, even the definition of affordable housing up to now, maybe others know, we have not yet defined it in terms of how does it look like, what are the standards for that house, And therefore, we can talk about it. What I know is that we talk about $10,000 type of house and so forth, precast maybe, or using bamboo, or using this and that. I think that's where we need to go to technology. Otherwise, if we don't go there, of course, the issues of cost are going to keep cropping up. And that brings the issue in terms of scaling larger projects. If you're going to build a block of apartments of about, for example, 500 units, then the cost of that construction, if you look at the disposable income or purchasing power of our populations, can't afford that up now. And that's why many people end up going into that top segment, unless you have government intervention in terms of bringing certain private-public partnerships on board, in terms of land or bringing the utilities on site, which comes also with its own problems of bureaucracy and corruption and all these issues. It's very difficult at this point in time to talk about an affordable house. So technology is very crucial, but we need to look at the houses in Kisumu, the houses in Mbarara, the houses in somewhere in the neighborhood of Kigali that indigenously were built, and how to improve those. Because for me, an affordable housing does not mean concrete, sand, and cement. It means a homestead of where someone is able to live decently with all the other aspects of garbage disposal, you know, and the water and power in place. There we can start solving the problem. That's my submission on this.
Okay, my next question is open for all the three of you. Now since
I'd like to respond to Vincent a bit, because what we've seen happening in Kenya, you're very right. You know, we really do have to go as far down the ladder as possible. But what we found was when we launched our most affordable home, which at the time was 1.2 million shillings.
Yes.
We had to restrict people from a certain income, above a certain income, from buying these houses. And we quickly learned that because the middle class is so unsatisfied, there's no availability for them to buy a home, that a developer with all good intentions, even us as a social impact developer, we still have to pay the bank in our salaries. And so what happens is you end up with a affordable home, but if you're not selling them to the market that you're targeting, the middle or slightly above that will gobble them up and buy them. So in the end, you end up not solving the problem. So to me, in my mind, satisfying that middle income first drives hope downwards, and so supply and demand downwards. But you're absolutely right; it's a real challenge. It really is. But thank you.
Maybe what I can, maybe.
So what you're saying, just to add the,
Yes.
Go on.
Please, Vincent.
So what I wanted to mention, and just to add to the conversation of the first question before we move to the next question, I think when it comes to material sources currently, I don't, because I'm at the tail end of one last project. We're at 99.5% complete. I can tell you from the time of when COVID hit to now, materials are up 20%. And we just hope it's a temporary increase because they closed the quarries. With the lockdown in Nairobi, construction materials were not essential services, so you couldn't get anything into Nairobi. A big reason why most of the sites are closed in Nairobi, Kenya, is because they can't even get steel, because there's not even steel to be able to construct currently. So currently the whole value chain of construction is disrupted, and we just hope with the way we have seen manufacturing being now encouraged by the government, we can be able to stop relying on imports and get a better way of managing our value chain. Secondly, when it comes to the issue of technology, and I think Ravi is very right, I think the challenge is, firstly, construction, the technology, whether you're using aluminum formwork or you're going to use precast, will shorten your construction. You could build like 3 slabs for apartments in 1 month, as opposed to traditional 1 month and you wait for it to cure and all those things. But the exit is what's very critical. If you build quickly and you have no clear exit, then of course you're stuck with units. And even when you look at a typical developer, how they structure their buying is they're telling potential purchasers, if you buy this, put this deposit, pay me quarterly, monthly. If you make it 1 year, it now also becomes unaffordable. But I think what's important is we need to see engagement, number one, like government, like what they're doing in Kenya with the Kenya Mortgage Refinance company, where they want to give a longer term loans for affordable housing. Currently, we had a call with them about 2 weeks ago. They want to define affordable housing as 4 million and below. So it basically means if I am able to use alternative technology, which by the way is not cheaper, I'm sure I can be able to exit at the 4 million. And how are we sure we can exit at the 4 million? If you look at the current scandals in Kenya of projects not being delivered and people losing their money, they're all at that price point, between 4 million to 4.5, because that seems to be a sweet spot for Kenyans to be able to afford a home. And that's why they pour in their savings, and at the end of the day, they have no product, because if you do as a developer the mathematics for that house, whether it's a 3-bedroom bungalow or 110 square meters, it's not possible to do that price point. And that's how we are seeing people losing their money in that fund. But I think that the technology can be leveraged if we are clear about the exit, because the exit is very, very critical. If we can give a young guy a 15-year mortgage, because they'll be able to take it up. What we have done as Natureville Homes is we have gone for a different approach. We are looking to work with social impact investors who can give long-term money at 15 years, which basically means we can offer TPS. And with the TPS, a guy who earns $500 per month can afford a 2-bedroom house that is close to junction for 20,000 shillings per month. I mean, these young guys, if you look at what they are very picky. They want a nice place that's near everything, that has Wi-Fi, has technology. So they're very picky what kind of units they want to buy. So you need to make it easy for them to purchase. And if in the area that we are saying the rent is 50,000, and I can offer you the same house for 22,000 shillings per month for 15 years, why would a guy refuse? Because your typical young guy is paying for a bed sitter between 10,000 to 50,000 shillings per month. So make it easy for these guys to also be able to take your product. And it takes a lot of machinations and a lot of being creative in your funding, in your financing, in your designs to make this happen.
Great. So the next question I want to put it for all of you to answer is obviously the technology that we talk about directly translates to whether it can give us a cost effectiveness, whether it can give us a speed effectiveness, and so on. But within your professional spheres, is there a particular research that you have come across or you do personally, item by item, saying this is what this will cost, this is the effectiveness with the alternate items that are available, material or technology per se? So is there a specific study which happens when you take up projects, or do you study this yourself, where you can have a comparative analysis of all the technologies and materials available in your market? Open for all.
Now, Ananya, if I can contribute to that, I think maybe with respect to my colleagues, maybe they have more data, but one of the issues is data scarcity in these countries. We are now working on a feasibility study for affordable housing with a German company, technology company. But, you know, just trying to get this information you're talking about is a bit difficult. So at the Real Estate Institute of East Africa, this is what we want to do. Can we have a regional data point whereby if someone came today and said, look, I need information about ABCD, we have a database whereby this information, the trends, the technology. Now, you can get this information, it is in silos, in quantity surveyors' offices, in architectural firms, and so forth. It is scattered. That's the only challenge, but the information is there. But with that withstanding, we know the average costs per square meter for class A building, class B, C, and D, and going forward, downwards. I mean, the colleagues who are on the panel know the cost of construction per square meter. Now, to me, again, it reminds to the issue of have we gotten the product right? Of course, the issue of exit is very crucial. That the financing has to back up that, because if you don't have a financing that is affordable for these people in the middle income to be able to buy what you have built so that you have an exit strategy, it becomes challenging. But as you get the financing strategy, you need also to have the product right. Now, my challenge today has been still, and we remind that the product we are talking about is still a bit not specific, because the 2-bedroom apartment in Kampala, because location is very crucial in terms of real estate, in our opinion, this side. If you build a building in location A and you put it in location B, the price changes. So the issue of land becomes very crucial. Now, how do we get land that is available to developers, probably through PPPs, or probably through the landlords that are having idle land, private partnerships, I would call them private partnerships. Someone has land, but that doesn't have the capacity, the money, and doesn't have the know-how, and partners with the developer. And the value of that land becomes an uptake into the development. Now, how do we get that discussion moving? Because, for example, in Kampala, there are people who have land close to the CBD with small shuttered houses. But I know these people might be interested also to own beautiful apartments. So that discussion needs to be, because if you get that owner of the land, partner with the developer, takes into the development as part of an investor, then you have a very good development in a good location. The issue here is, how do you cushion that with the political and the lack of confidence that my land is going to be taken away and so forth? I think that's where we are not good at, to create partnerships that last, but so that everyone partakes into the return on investment in that project. So for me, that's what I would like to see in Kampala, because as Avarts, we would like to say, can we get a developer in a good, fair, good location? That developer, that landowner brings his land on board. We bring the money, we bring the technology, and then have a development, and everyone partakes in that. Then we can address the young people whom we are talking about, and also talk to financiers who appreciate this, including social investors. Then they can bring money that is not expensive and long-term in nature. That would be my thinking on how to approach this. But as for now, an individual developer taking that route, the issue of exit comes, and then actually you have many units and you cannot sell them. What do? You're stuck with the project. So it has to be a partnership approach, either through PPPs or private partnerships with landowners in fairly good locations. Then you can bring the technology, you can bring the finance, and have the project complete. To me, that's my opinion. And maybe finance, we can talk to pension funds. These institutions, I don't know how they are in Kenya, the pension funds in Kenya. You find them investing in foreign markets in the region because they have better returns there in bonds and treasury bills. But they are not interested in housing because of long-term nature and also some more bureaucracy and so forth. But I think if they put their money, the pension funds, into housing, even their own members, the ones who save, those would be the ones to uptake these developments. So how do we get those pension funds to appreciate, given their footing into government, in order to appreciate that actually if you invested in housing, the multiplier effect is so huge and you kill about 3 birds with 1 stone, including home ownership for the population. Over to you, Ananya.
Anyone wants to add further to that?
Yeah, I think what Micheal alluded to earlier is it's actually the sort of reverse. It's not the trouble of delivery, it's the trouble of offtake. And I think Micheal and I should definitely meet up and discuss tenant purchase schemes, because that's the direction that we all have to go in. And the more of us that are doing it, the more funds we can put together and the more variety of projects we can look at delivering. So my view on materials and technology and contracts and costs, if there was a situation where we even had a 50% surety that we had a TPS to serve the market, exactly what Micheal and I look at, the 25 to 45-year-old low to middle income earner with a growth potential, then you'd go with an EPC contract and take out the construction risk, because your duty, you'll pay a bit more and you'll focus on getting the sales and the offtake. Now, in Kenya and Uganda, people are happily borrowing from microfinance companies at 20, 25%, right? So, and they don't default. You know, so if you create a tenant purchase scheme at the 15, 16, 17% mark, it could be it could work very, very well. If you get it down to 8%, you're laughing all the way to the bank, literally. And so is the customer. So I always go back to the fact that I'm not, the cost of construction is your fixed in nature, right? It's the offtake which is the risk that we have to resolve. It's why nobody's doing this. I mean, I see guys on the call who I know are interested in this this business. Feel free to talk to me about heart attacks and stress, but it's a huge opportunity. And if we can get these links. links right. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, maybe what I can add is just on the comparison between alternative building technologies and traditional. If you look at the Kenya Police Housing Project, they use prefabs. They were only going until 4 floors. And when they were done, as per their final account, they were 38,000 shillings per square meter. And this was 3 to 4 years ago. So it is not really cheaper, because I have taken my BQ and I've run the same numbers through the same technology. And it's not cheaper. But the thing is, if I was able to do it quicker, then it would reduce my finance costs if the exit was assured. And that's why we're talking about the whole issue of TPS. So just like what Vincent said, the data is not there. But what I say, as any person who's in business, who, if you want to find out the information, you have to go and dig. So I've gone, I've sat, I've listened. And the thing is, even when it comes to alternative technologies, I'll just give you a funny story. When the police were given those houses, they didn't want to move in. They didn't believe, because there are no columns. so they had to actually bring a physical panel and tell them to shoot the panel to confirm the strength of that building. And it reminds me of when we used to have carburetor cars, and then we got EFI engines, power windows. Just that transition from technology, us as Africans, is very, 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 very slow. I have a friend who began doing alternative technology many years ago in Natureville, and he had a hard time to sell because people could not believe you're building a house without stones. So there's a whole education process that we need to. And I think that example of when the police were given, okay, here's a panel, shoot and see what happens, and none of the bullets could go through the concrete panels, then they were comfortable, because we have that perception. If I'm not seeing a column, I'm not seeing a beam, this building is going to fall like a deck of cards. And that's what some of these technologies, we need to educate the people out there around them.
So Michael, I have a very similar funny story with technology, where we did a focus group where we put a traditional panel just with a window and an EPS panel. And we asked the focus group. And of course, they were like, you know, in Kenya, I don't know if it's in Uganda, it's the 3 M's. You go from mud to mabati to mawe. And when you get to mawe, which is stone, you've arrived. Okay, now, most alternative technology doesn't look like mawe. So you feel like you've been conned. But we did a similar thing. And so then the APs who were there assisting us, the question was about security. And, oh, you can shoot a bullet through the wall. So the AP simply took his gun and broke the window and said to the crowd, when you break into a house, you don't break the wall, you break the window. And the penny dropped. And from that, we've learned that when we interview people about technology, when you're getting professors at university, lawyers, accountants, that type of person, they are very comfortable. And so if you were to take the risk, you'd want to pitch to them first, and then the crowd will follow them, because you know nobody likes to be a guinea pig. So it's quite an interesting thing, but your story is great. The other funny thing with that police housing is the water tank was gravity fed and it was lower than the 3rd floor. So the water couldn't even get to the, anyway, very, very particular design nuances I have. But thank you, Michael.
Okay, moving on, before we get on to the next subject of discussion, I would like to inform the audience that the Q&A box is open for you to put in your questions. I can see some of them have already started posting their questions. These will all be answered at the end of this session in the last 15 minutes. So you can continue the questions coming in, and we'll all address this at the end of this session. So moving on, because there has been a lot of talk about offtake and finance and getting your houses to sell. I want to ask, because there have been some policy changes in Kenya very recently with respect to pension funds. Micheal and Ravi, how do you see this coming in place for your offtake finance, and how is it helping you to sell?
Should I go, Michael?
Yeah, go on, Ravi.
I think Vincent touched on it very well. The rent, you see, in our market, a place like Nairobi, for example, 92% of people rent. It's a choice because, you know, people like to be mobile, but it means that 92% of the land is owned by 8% of the population, probably in cash. So rental yields don't ever really make sense. You're looking at 5 to 7% range on rental yield, maybe higher now in the affordable section. A pension fund is not going to find that too attractive, right? So I know the directive is really encouraging them to look at the sector, but let's see where it goes, because it'll come to a loggerhead when it goes upstairs to the sort of board of directors or the decision makers who are responsible to give their pension funds the best return that they can find. And property will not be high on the list. So I think there is going to be a disconnect, but I'm really encouraged by the fact that the conversation is being driven by the president. You know, I think that's encouraging. But let's see where that goes. I don't want to be a pessimist, but that's how pension funds tend to work. And I think Vincent alluded to that earlier as well.
Micheal, do you want to add something to it?
Yeah, I agree with them. I mean, if you look at the typical projects that pension funds do, they have not really been on the affordable housing, and maybe except maybe an SSF. In fact, next to my office is a big signboard of a project being done by a certain pension fund that's at 90 million. That's $900,000. And there are $1 million homes done by the pension fund. So you wonder how these kind of decisions are made. And I think I've come to the point that as developers, we need to look for a different path, because if we wait for the government, if we wait for the pension funds, we will never tackle this issue. And I think once you go through some of the questions, I'll give you some of my thoughts, but we need to be creative on how we can go to offer the product without having to rely on the pension fund, on the government, because if we wait, we will wait until our grandkids are also waiting for the same process, because it's not easy for government to change some of the policies. I'm part of the KEPSA Housing and Sector Board. It's very difficult, even as we engage the government, to have some of these changes that will make things easier for us to build this affordable housing. So it's on us as developers to look at it differently, and for each one of us to take a chunk and bite a piece of it. I think Karibu Homes was one of the first innovators around. I remember going to their projects years back. I'm like, what? 1.8? I need to see this. And he had his own innovation where I'll give you the house, I won't do the full finishing, but I've given you the house. So when you get money, you can finish as you can. And those are the kind of innovations we have to think about. Because if you look at your BQ, remove some of those costs, it's pretty significant, and it allows you to bring your price down. Then we can do it. So for me, I'm of the view is, if we just say, I'm waiting for government, I'm waiting for this, we're going to wait for a pretty long time. Even the government themselves, they have tried to do their project in Park Road using traditional technology, but you can see the hassle and the effort it has taken them. It is not easy. And even with those PPPs, there are certain rules that come and bite you later, because, oh, it was public land, so it can't be sold. So basically you can't give a lease on this house. So there's a lot of policy that needs to be changed, and changing policy in government is very, very difficult and takes very, very long. So I think the onus is on developers to be smart, to be like Ravi, or like what we're trying to do for 500 units. We need to be smart and look at it differently to be able to achieve the product. Otherwise, it will never get done.
Vincent, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Micheal. You know, for me, with due respect to these governments, you know, it's affordable housing is a social good. It's to the biggest extent. And yes, the private sector can play your role. I mean, we can provide the units we can in the market, but I'm not saying that we need we have no option. We can't let off the hook these guys in the government really to close an eye to their responsibility. As we do our own creativity and ingenuity to really develop our own innovations and so forth, I think there is need to continue engaging these guys to understand that you put the money where actually you get more money out of it. And I know governments are not good businessmen and women, but if we are looking at impacting society, I mean, for example, in the Netherlands, I was with one of the ladies who works with the Amsterdam, the municipality of Amsterdam. And she was telling me, look, I mean, there is an engagement between the municipality there, or the city authority, and the developers, that whatever you put on a small patch of land, there is participation of the. So this discussion of getting these governments really appreciate the housing sector. In terms of even, look at this COVID-19. I was so worried in our country here that if this spread in a community, we would be dying like nothing. Lucky enough, it has not done so, because the way housing is actually done in terms of these slums and houses, how do you do even contact tracing? So I think the debate with the government has to continue. Yes, we have to be creative, but when they don't do their job, it very much affects us in private sector. So yes, we might have developers who are on hands in terms of developing the product, but how can we as an industry also have our own in the industry who go to government with an understanding of what we are supposed to do, so that when we are talking to government, we are talking to people who understand what is on ground. So that is now for me, it's, you know, in Uganda, for example, I don't know how it is in Kenya, there is this middle class, elite class who do not like politics, do not like to be in government, do not like to do, and they have very brilliant ideas, very nice innovations, but when it comes to integrating them into the community, they can't avoid government. So the other thing would be people within ourselves. I don't know how that profession will be called, because you have architects, you have developers, you have real estate managers and agents. Maybe we should have political real estate guys who are put into those ministries and be able to push those policies, because affordable housing is a semi-social good. You can do as much as an individual developer. So Michael, I agree with you. These guys will not change. We should be moving. But how do we influence policy to ensure that one day we have these guys appreciate that organized housing is not only a benefit of the developer, but it creates a society that actually cuts costs on managing society in terms of public health, infrastructure. 60% of the infrastructure in a country is basically tied around housing. And the 40% is the external roads that connects to those neighborhoods. So if you solve the issue of housing, because it comes automatically with infrastructure in it, you have done part of 60% of the infrastructure you need in the country. That debate has to be told. This Minister of Finances, this Minister of Housing, they need to get their priorities right. And I think we need to continue doing that.
Yeah, maybe just to clarify, I think what I was alluding to is, yes, for example, I personally, with Capsule, we're engaging the government around what we want, or some of the concessions, all the things that we require. But the point is, if we all say and we sit and wait for all those things to be ratified, we will not do anything. So I'm of the view is, as the government is getting their stuff together, looking at the policies, looking how they can engage, we need to be doing something also as a private sector. Because if we all wait and just wait for the government, then nothing moves. And be creative like what Ravi is doing and like what we're trying to do. Try and think outside the box in being able to deliver the houses, because when you are at the forefront, when the policies now actually changed, you'll have a head start in front of everyone else, because you've been doing it. And now all that benefit now works to your advantage to even go lower. Because if you look at the typical finance structure of a developer, typically in Nairobi, this is what I tell people. Your lazy developer who goes to the bank and borrows 80%, 90% money from the bank, his finance cost at the end of his product is 30%, because you look at the years and the 2 years to build and the exit and all these things, he's just paying interest, he's paying interest, he's paying interest. So 30% of that house ends up being a finance cost. So how are you able to leverage and change that discussion? Because if you can give that 30% and get your product down by 30%, can't you now change the pricing of your product to the market? Because you're not following the lazy approach of a lazy developer who doesn't want to work hard and think creatively on how to get his pricing down. Things even like cost engineering of our projects from your design, making sure your design is efficient so the price is low. We want to do fancy curves and all these kind of things. Those things are just a waste of money, because a curved room, 10%, 20% of that space is unusable. So those kind of things that we as developers also need to take to approach. And just to give you an example of myself personally, our 500 units will be in an area where the price of land is $1.5 million an acre. We're able to do 500 units on 6 acres and get the price point to 3.7 million for 2-bedroom for 60 square meters. It's all a matter of how do you structure all these things around your funding, around your pricing, around your cost engineering, around your finishes. to get your price to that point where it actually becomes affordable. If I was to do a 1 bedroom, the price will be just below 2 million. So it's how can we be creative to provide this product in the market? Because I think as developers, over and above the 30%, which is your finance cost, is a 30% margin I want to make. So we're looking at 30 and 30, that's 60. So 60% of the cost of that house is profit and finance cost. So how can you play those metrics to bring the cost down? And it takes people like Ravi who want to do things differently to start thinking, how can I change that narrative? Where if you look in Kenya, developers are just viewed as guys who just want to make money. We have actually a negative connotation. In fact, I say, I'm in real estate, I don't say I'm a developer because the perception of a developer is a guy who wants to grab, make money at any cost, put the poor guy down, and we need to change that view and narrative of a developer.
I think that's very well put across. What I conclude out of this is at the same time where we all need governments to take actions to push things forward, which I think is case in all the developing countries all over the world. But the changes are to happen over a very long period of time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think it's to take charge for every single person within that market to do things differently, to make things work around the policies that exist already. So moving on from there, because a lot of finance has been talked about, and we want to also talk about the supply side finance. My question is, in your line of business, due to the pandemic that is ongoing, have you seen any changes or any changes that you foresee in the near future with respect to your supply finance, that investments were coming in, what probably local investments that might be affected, or investments from abroad, especially Europe and US, who have a major chunk of investment within Africa, especially in the affordable housing sector? Do you see any changes happening there? Vincent, would you like to start? You're muted. You're muted, Vincent.
Sorry, yes, I'm here. I will keep remembering that. Sorry for that. You were talking about post-COVID-19, I mean, or the COVID-19, what are we going to see in terms of, for me, Micheal and Ravi, I don't know if when we are being locked down here in Kampala, the whole message was go home. Go home. So it means all of us, all of a sudden, we were dispatched to home. And to me, that was a strong message. When I look today and say, look, in terms of essential services that countries should be focused on, we remind on food, we remind on a home, we remind on health, and probably some few clothes around us. All our beautiful cars, all our beautiful set of televisions, and all different big phones were just lying on the table. Now, being optimistic, I think going forward, people are going to prioritize housing as a very key investment. Because when we are discussing the subject now of whether landlords should forgive rent to tenants, or how should we handle that, people have not worked for 2 months. How are they going to pay rent? I think anyone who has been renting today must be thinking, I wish I had my own home. So how does that play locally? I think locally, people are going to engage more into the housing sector, into the real estate sector, privately, as Micheal is saying, because they're going to say, look, if I can have my money, I would rather invest it in a house or in developing a property, because at the end of the day, it stands out to be in hard times and in good times, something that you can actually fall back to. So in my opinion, I'm optimistic that we might see many people engaging into the housing sector and the real estate sector, both at purchasing and also investment locally. Probably internationally, of course, people might say, yeah, the political risks of the countries, the economic risks, the lack of regulations and all those things, that of course changes over time, as how Micheal was also saying, governments take time to change certain things. But if today I was running a bar in my own town and see what has happened to my bar for the last 2 months and 4 months, and also with no hope of it being opened tomorrow because people think it is not an essential service, tomorrow I would invest in a unit of housing so that actually, probably, if I had even more money, I would do a mixed-use building whereby I have shops on the ground floor, I have apartments in the upstairs, so that in case shops are closed, then I'm able to still get rent because people are sleeping in the houses. I think that's what we are going to see going forward. And for me, that is good for the housing sector, it's good for the industry. Maybe my colleagues can add on.
Ravi, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Vincent. That's very true. I mean, the COVID pandemic has really made people realize that renting is a risky option in these times. What I'm seeing from personal experience in Kenya is we've got increased site visits. So we're getting more people visiting the project than we did before COVID because people have time. We're also seeing that banks are a little bit more, this 100% mortgage, which was never good for us, is now no longer. Banks are requiring at least 20 or 30% deposit. And they're really reluctant to lend because job security has been impacted by COVID, of course. So really to our benefit, most of my sales are now just cash. And I'm offering major discounts publicly on the internet, up to 20% off the list price. So we can keep this cash coming in during this period, which is working. So that's on the project itself. Interestingly, investors that wouldn't never talk to me because, people like IFC and World Bank and maybe the larger sort of DFIs, they want $20, $30 million ticket sizes. Since COVID happened, people who just wouldn't give me a time of the day are happily on Zoom with me once or twice a week, learning more fishing and trying to understand, but getting their ticket sizes lower so that they can actually accommodate people like ourselves. So strangely, COVID will end and the opportunities will be sitting there ready. And I think what a lot of investor types, especially even social investors, they don't want to miss that first bite. You want to be in first when the opportunity comes around. So that's my feeling. I don't want to sound over positive, but I'm seeing things working that way from the affordable housing section.
Michael, you're muted, Michael.
Yeah, just to echo some of the sentiments. Yeah, if you look at the banking sector, of course, there is decreased lending because of uncertainty of jobs. So even for those customers that had offer letters from the bank, I guess it's a wait and see whether the bank will honor those or not. We personally are working towards social impact funds. In fact, my last meeting with one of my social investors, he was here, was the day when the president announced our first COVID case, but we still had the meeting, but it was a chaotic day. We had a call 3 weeks ago, and the social investors are looking to double down on investment in East Africa, which I found very strange because they are Americans, and America, we all know, has been hit the hardest of all the countries worldwide. And in fact, the point, they're also looking at supporting very verifiable African businesses with support during this COVID season. So it's a very interesting because a social investor looks at investment very differently than your commercial VC kind of investor. I always tell people is they look at the heart of the person they're investing into as opposed to just the project. So who are you? What do you stand for? Do you align with my values? Then we look at the project. So I foresee in the next 1 or 2 months, those funds opening up because I think the COVID situation has been a great equalizer. So you see your fellow human being in a different light. And for example, even for us who are on this call, you look at your house help in a different light. You're like, wow, how do you live? What's happening? Do you have water where you stay? Because it's a great equalizer. So the same thing is happening to social impact investors. They're like, how is Africa surviving? How are they going to get off through this crisis? So they're looking at it very differently because this crisis has made us see what are the things that are important in life as opposed to other things that we have been looking for in the past. And for me, I'm seeing a great insurgence and changes on how Africa is being viewed by some of these social investors out there and looking to help because they are seeing is I've made all this money. So with all this money, I haven't escaped COVID either. So how can I use my money for the betterment of human beings?
Great. So I think now we're running a little over time. So I will start taking the audience questions. The first question that comes in is from Alurail Bernard. who says there is ongoing debate about renting or owning, or which is better, or there is a rent to own model that we should all look at. Individually, can you please let us know what is your opinion, starting with Vincent? Vincent, you're mute. Vincent, you're mute. Vincent?
Is talking about renting or renting to own? Yes, I'm on now.
Yes. So which
Hello?
of the
You can hear
three
me?
options? Yes.
Yeah. So this question was about
renting, owning, or rent to own model. What is, in your opinion, is going to come out better in the long run?
No, I think, again, rent-to-own model would be the best, really, because what Michael was saying at the beginning was that if, for example, you look at the rent the person is paying on the other side and you're able to deliver that product, and instead of paying rent, but someone pays that money in a pipeline to own, that would be the best model. So as Michael says, we developers, we have to be creative. The developers have to be creative with this. And for everyone else of us, why should I spend all this rent on a property that I'm not going to own if there was an opportunity at Ravi's development or Michael's development whereby I can actually turn my rent into mortgage finance for in 20 years or 15 years to own that property. So I think that's the direction we should be looking at going forward. Of course, not all of us in countries, 40 million Ugandans will always own homes. There will always be those to rent. But those who should rent really should be at the level whereby they cannot find a product that they can turn their rent into ownership.
Ravi, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think the TPS model is the way forward. Interest rates are very expensive in all our countries. They're not viable. That's why there's such few mortgages, because people have historical baggage from their parents or grandparents where they know that you take a 20-year mortgage on year 19, this is the sentiment people have. The bank will jack up the interest rates and take the house. So there's definitely a trust issue with banks and long-term borrowing. And banks, to be honest, make more money lending short-term with quick turnovers and things like that. So I would say the TPS model is the way to go forward. Yeah, I agree with Vincent.
Yes, and the next question is specifically for Ravi and Micheal, because you are both developers. Victor Malu says 4 million Kenyan shillings is still quite an unaffordable amount for the regular Kenyans. So is there a way you could bring it down or look at bringing it down to 1.5 million? Or if you can, then what is the value chain approach that you want to take ahead with this? Micheal, starting with you.
Well, yeah, I think when I mentioned the 4 million, that was the upper limit of what the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company is looking at. So you have between 0 to 4 million to play with the figure. I think we have a chicken and egg situation in Kenya, especially in urban areas. Everybody wants to live in the urban areas, close to transport, close to sewer, there's water, all these things. But the fact is the land in those areas is not cheap. So there comes to a point where you can, for lack of a better term, have an irreducible minimum of what you can actually cost your house and put it on the market. In our case, you are looking at 1.995 million as for a one-bedroom unit. But for me, when I look and I talk with my social investors, they want someone to be in a place, even when they get married or they have children, they can continue to stay in it. Because if you give a young guy a one bedroom, let's say for 35 square meters, for argument's sake, what happens typically when he gets married or children? What the next level they do is they move out to get more space and move out. So would you want to pay for a TPS for that kind of unit? I'm not so sure. Maybe Ravi can give me his thoughts on that. But if you make it a 2-bedroom, 60 square meters, well-designed is adequate. You have an adequate kitchen, make it open, free-flowing, have a decent bedroom, have decent spacing for your bathrooms, etc. You could say, you know what, I can hustle and wait for that 10-year to stay in this unit, even when I get married, because I'm renting to own this product. So when it comes to the price point, yes, you can get cheaper, but it depends how closer do you want to be to the city. The farther you go out of the city, the cheaper it becomes. The closer you are in the city, the more expensive it is. And even as we look at the land prices, I am of the view still, even post-COVID or how we look at it in Nairobi specifically, those properties in those prime areas, if they are to drop maybe 10%, but we are not going to see drops of 70, 60% on the cost of land because the good land in good locations is still scarce. It is not in plentiful because in Kenya, we have this whole thing of, we have 5 acres, you have family, let's go divide everything into 1/8 acres. So as a developer, you get a 5 piece here, one 1/8 piece here, another 1/8 piece here. It becomes very difficult to create a community when you have land that is divided into small pieces. So we are challenged because the cost of construction in Kenya, we all know, is one of the highest in Africa. So we just need to work with creative ways to get the price as low as we can. But to get a 2-bedroom unit, even the government themselves are saying it's 3 million. The government themselves are saying it's 3 million for their 2-bedroom unit in Park Road. So it's actually almost impossible to get that price point because of all those factors.
And Ananya, may I ask some question to Micheal?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, Micheal, and Ravi, what do you think about, because when I'm hearing what we have been discussing about is that it's also a bit difficult to achieve an affordable housing in isolation in terms of a standalone project, for example, in the CBD of Kampala. Maybe could be achievable if we focused on what we call satellite cities, whereby you go outside Nairobi and then get this, for example, maybe 100 acres of land and create an integrated community there with a commercial setting, with an industrial back end to it, with an agricultural feeder to it, and build because affordability for me, what I see from this discussion means also the movement of people from workplaces to going home and the saturation of population around the area. So when you hint on the point of that people want to be near shopping malls and all that, so doing affordable housing within the already established neighborhoods becomes a bit more complicated because you want to get that size of the land that actually where all these things are around it. What do you think about satellite cities in terms of the agenda of affordable housing?
So I'll answer your question just after the original one of getting the price point down. Yeah. I think, Micheal, the big cost is the finance cost. And before I came back home, I used to develop in the UK, where the banks would fund your project throughout until you made sales because there was a mortgage offtakes finance. And they took a project finance-based approach rather than a corporate finance-based approach. If local banks or DFIs could switch their thinking into a project finance-based approach, then it would most likely be able to get a unit that currently is on the market at 4 million down to maybe 3. I'm just throwing the number out there, but it would bring it down. And the profit margin for the developer wouldn't change, the IRR. So the finance cost is an issue. To answer your question, I'm a huge fan. We've just bought 20 acres in a place called Tatu City. It's like buying in a US subdivision. I've got a bike path around my plot, service, water, it's plug and play. Whereas in Athi River, it's like the Wild West. I still have random water companies coming to disconnect my sewer, random guys, you know, it's mayhem. So I'm very pro the satellite city or the large master planned mixed development approach. I think it's the way to go, especially because it also addresses the issue that everyone in Kenya, from the president down to our house staff, it's security. So you really feel safe when you're in a neighborhood that's sort of encompassing. So yeah, I'm a fan.
So the next question is coming from Ellen, which quite relates to what Ravi just pointed out in terms of mortgages. So the question is there a possibility that we could get these mortgage rates lower and lower in Africa? Because mortgage, as I understand, it goes anywhere between 25 to 35 to 40% what the banks can offer. So can we take an approach to lower this?
So we have an interest rate cap in Kenya, so mortgages are capped. But you know, it's market forces. It's the cost of money. So I don't see mortgages coming down in the market. But the KMRC is a very well thought through product. They've got well thought through price points, income brackets, and qualification criteria. I don't know, Micheal, I've never heard about pricing. I hear everything from 8 to 13, so I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. We had a call with KPDA 3 weeks ago as part of the call with KMRC. So the thinking is 8 to 10%. So we know in Kenya, when someone tells you 8 to 10%, that means it will be 10%, which is still 2 basis points below what the official mortgage rate is. But for me, with the modeling that we are doing with international investors, is we're looking at 6%. And with 6%, that 6% that is both for construction and an exit perspective and a long-term TPS. And with that kind of money, just 6% just to construct, just 6% alone just changes the whole pricing of your product. So the mortgages actually say the word mortgage should be banned from being used in Kenya, because whenever you mention mortgage, it has a very, very negative connotation. If I look at my current buyers, they're doing SACCO loans. The rate is the same as a mortgage, but they would rather go through that process than to go through what we call a mortgage, because a mortgage is set to in a way, it's expensive. The bank is just looking for a way to get your house. So it has a very negative connotation. And if you look at what NSF did with their TPS, their rate is the same. It's 12% per year, but it's a tenant purchase scheme. It's technically a mortgage, but the way it is being branded and set allows someone to be able to accept that figure and go with it. But when the time you say mortgage, everyone just closes their in fact, on site we hear, no mortgage, no mortgage, no mortgage. It's the first thing they say. But they're going to a SACCO to get the same money at a similar rate. So I see maybe the best case in Kenya, if you're lucky, at 8%, but most probably the KMRC maybe at 10%, but we'll see when they officially publish what they'll be giving. But the good thing about KMRC, they're looking up to 25 years as a term, which is long, but at least it allows your monthly payment to be low.
And Micheal, your 6% is dollar-based or?
Dollar-based, so I have to hedge.
Dollar-based. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to the next question, what was already discussed at one point through the session was the property prices are going to be more heavily discounted in the near future for it to sell, and because there's a lot of economic crisis that is going on right now. So is this going to negatively affect international investors to put their money into this sector? Micheal, do you want to answer that?
You mentioned that the prices will come down?
Yes. So as it is happening, the property prices in general are coming down. Is it going to affect the investor interest negatively?
Okay, maybe I can just touch about the property price decreases. If you look at where the properties price decreases happening currently in Kenya and Nairobi is on the high end. Those who are selling at 28 million are now coming 25 million to 20 million just to exit. And I think also what's happening is with the whole restructuring of loans by banks, it's giving developers some breathing room. So some of them have decided we are not going to drop our prices. But see, when it comes to affordable housing, we are at rock bottom. Where else can we go? We have no room to drop the price given rates, because we already, our own projects, we are 30% below the market of what my neighbors are building at. So yes, there is a pressure on that, but surprisingly, like what Ravi was saying, we are seeing more people coming to sites at this moment. So everyone is looking to see if they can get what they call a COVID deal. And there are not many COVID deals happening except on the high end, because when you are looking at the affordable space, we're really at the lower end of the spectrum, and we have really re-engineered and gotten our cost to be as low as possible.
Great. So we, I think, are running really short out of time. So I will request you all to take one conclusive note before we end the session, starting with Ravi.
Yeah, really a pleasure to meet you guys, Micheal and Vincent. Hopefully we can get together as industry comrades and discuss how we can do this better. And thank you very much, Anu, for hosting.
Great. Micheal?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you very much for hosting us. I think if there are any developers on the call, I think it's important to look at social impact funds. In fact, there's a whole study done by IFC. It's actually online, that's published. There's almost $1.3 trillion every year available of social impact funds. Some are run through asset managers, some are individuals, people who are rich. I got a chance to go to the US 2 years ago to meet some of these rich guys and have the discussions about what I'm doing. So those are the kind of things that we need to look at because, for example, social impact funds, one of the people I was talking to, he gave $50 million to build a campus. He was going to charge them a small interest, around 3%. But when it was done, he decided, you know what, don't pay me back. I'm happy to it's a fantastic project, keep the money. So all these guys have different ways of looking at what they want to do with their money. And I think if you look at what's happening in the UK, there are a lot of social impact funds specifically for housing that have come up. There's one by CBRL Ellis, because that's the way we can get this pricing down. So we have a rate that is affordable. And when the rate is affordable, we can bring our cost of our housing down.
Vincent.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ananya. Micheal and Ravi, I would like to tell you that Avarts Housing Limited is the child in the corner in Uganda. We are interested in the affordable housing. So I would really like to get in touch with you, benchmark what you are doing in Kenya. We've been doing real estate management for the last 14 years. So we're now going into affordable housing. So I would like really to come and visit your projects. And of course, the social impact funds is really crucial, Micheal. I would like really to get in touch with you and we see how we can also have some interventions here in Uganda. Ananya, thanks very much for this. I think we should continue it. And I think I enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you to the participants also.
Great. Thank you all for being online and putting up both the problems and the solutions on the same platter and making it such an engaging and informative session for all of our audiences. We're going to continue with the AHI's web series, and this was just the first episode of it, and we're going to keep you all posted for more. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.